Welcome to the very next episode of The Lair. And joining me is an extremely special guest, the 5-time winner of the Capital Tech Researcher of the Year. He was Faculty of the Year at Cal Poly as an adjunct professor, and then they changed the game and no longer allowed adjunct faculty to do this again. And if it wasn't for COVID-19, he would already have won Research of the Year at High Point University. The co-founder and primary host of This Life in Tech, the Ninja, Dr. Jason Pittman. Welcome.
Hey, man, that was a great introduction, my friend. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
I could definitely promo it up. You know, like I keep telling you, especially on This Life in Tech, Conor McGregor cannot promo as good as I am. It's just not possible.
Well, you know, and your intro cut to the videos has like a little Undertaker vibe to it. And
yeah.
And now I'm thinking maybe I'm the Undertaker and you're that greasy. I can't remember his name. Paul Bearer. That was it. Paul Bearer. Dude, what a great gag that was. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. You know, one of my interns was saying it looks kind of like Raiden from Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, that's good too.
Yeah, I was like, all right.
That was always my favorite character.
Yeah, he was pretty badass. So I brought you on today mainly because we don't get a lot of time to talk specifically about this on This Life in Tech, and it has to do with why you believe privacy must end. Your book.
Yeah.
The best part about your book was you saying that I helped you with it. That was probably the best part.
Well, hey, look, man, everybody plays a part. But yeah, I think particularly that time we spent at DEF CON, and we were able to talk about the idea of privacy and what it meant to us as individuals. And, although we have different opinions, I think they both come from a place of wanting the best for people and for ourselves. I mean, let's be honest, for ourselves. And,
sure.
After a couple of years of thinking about it and talking to you and some other people, I was able to formulate enough of what I thought represented my view. And yeah, one 500 to 1,000 word essay at a time. It took me the summer, which is a good pace for me given my general workload. And I ended up with Privacy Must End, Freeing Information for the Future of Mankind.
Yeah, so in the beginning you talk about two groups of privacy. One that's essentially seeking to exact and assert control over information, and then two being on the other extreme where everyone just must keep all of their data private. And at least in the beginning, you talk about how you're in the middle.
Yeah, well, I think to start with, an important distinction is I'm not talking about today. The opinion I have about privacy isn't applicable to the world we live in right now. It's much more of a, as the subtitle says, a future view of things. And it's based on this idea that right now we're locked into these two polar extremes of I have information and I cannot let anybody else have it at any cost. And I don't have information, so I need to get information at any cost. And it creates this asymmetry. When it doesn't have, in my view, after thinking about it, and this is really my thesis, is it doesn't have to be that way if we just take a different view of what information is and why and how it has value and to whom it has value. And once you start to realize that, like one of my sub theses, if you will, or sub points, is that privacy is not natural. It's not a natural state for us. So why does it become part of the natural world if it's unnatural? And so I built this idea, and I mean it sincerely, that we part do it out of fear, we part do it out of misunderstanding, and part we do it because of the power dynamics. I mean, the world we live in today is such that you and I have information of some kind that has some value to somebody else, simply based because somebody else, another third party, doesn't have it. Think about marketing. I mean, that's really what drives social media, is marketing. Why does that data have value? Well, because it can be used to get me to buy products. And sometimes I don't think that's a bad thing. And so once you start to turn around and think about, well, rather than trying to keep that data private and investing all that energy and what would be innovative forethought into how to protect my information, why not open it up, make it all transparent, co-op it, everybody can profit from it, right? And that removes the asymmetry, and it would remove the imbalance and thus the need for privacy.
So with Elon Musk talking about, very recently that he can't beat AI, so he's just going to join it. And that's why he's created the Neuralink. So now all of a sudden people potentially, and he believes, worst case scenario, 10 years, and this device could be in our brain and would essentially, connect us to the rest of the board, because really what I'm thinking it is, he's not going Star Wars, he's going Star Trek. He wants to be, what was it on Star Trek? The queen of the board?
Yeah, the board. Yeah, I don't remember. She had like a code name or some shit.
Yeah, it wasn't Locutus, which was Picard. But, has how you're seeing that future change? Of course, you wrote this last summer.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden it's changing to where potentially, now in our lifetime, we could have something that's connecting us, which could, in theory, give us access to all information that's published, whether it be on the dark web or on Wikipedia. We'd have access to the Wayback Machine, as you mentioned in the book, at all times. Does that change your opinion of the future of privacy?
No. In fact, I think the success of something like an embedded AI vis-a-vis Neuralink, or even any type of more advanced AI that's more of a, let's say, a partner for us, completely hinges on our impetus to get rid of privacy. Like here's an example which led me in part to start thinking about what a consequence is to ending privacy. Okay, so all forms of AI are driven by data, massive volumes of data, right? The more data they have, essentially what happens is you take a partially observable environment, which is imperfect and has a lot of risk in it in the decision matrix, and you start to render it more observable. And the more observable that environment becomes, the more perfect knowledge the AI has, the better the decisions it can make. You can see this with autonomous vehicles. And so I was driving home one day, and I was thinking about AI and how the question of whether AI superintelligence will wake up and kill us is the wrong question. This is a different conversation, but it sets the premise for this. And I started to think the right question is, will that AI save us? Different question. And in order to think that through, I started to realize that autonomous vehicles, which we already have, need massive amounts of data. Okay, so very likely that in the near future, probably soon, right, within a few years, let's say a fleet of autonomous vehicles are driving, and one of them is going to crash. And in order to determine how to crash, that AI would need more of a perfectly observable environment, okay? So that's a classic ethical question. Who do you throw off the boat to save the group, right? But frame it a little differently and start to
Easy,
wonder.
anyone but me.
Yeah, right, exactly. The closest person. And start to think about it. Okay, so if I want my car to make the best decision, I need to feed it perfect data. And I don't mean perfect like integrity. I mean just as much data as possible so that it can make the best decision, right? And so if we have privacy and certain elements of data are being withheld, let's say from the larger noosphere, that, if we have Neuralink or some approximation of it, we're all tapped into, then the AI isn't going to make the most optimal decision. And I think if you buy into a social contract whereby we're all participating in a social system like that, it kind of makes sense that you want it to make the best decision, even if that's at the cost of your own life, right? Now that's a little utopian. I get it. The book is a little optimistic in its view of things.
Well, you're talking about where you believe the world should be in order for us to expedite advancement in a way, because at a certain point in time, yes, the sun's going to end and we need to get off this planet, which is why, Elon Musk, even though I'm not a huge fan, he does say some interesting things, which does align with a lot of what I believe you and I believe, which is if I'm using my energy to do something that's really dragging me down, then it's preventing me from doing what I believe is important to be next. And so Elon's sold all of his things, all of his possessions, and he wants to put all of his energy into getting into Mars because he feels that's the most important thing. And every time he's not doing something towards getting to Mars, it's a waste.
Yeah.
And your premise is, well, we're doing the same thing with privacy. At least, that's what I kind of take away from it, that we're spending a lot of time protecting all of our information because, well, there is a monetary factor to it, even though you say that to me, it was interesting. You said that information is not money, but would you say that it's currency?
Yeah, see, and I think that's an interesting view of it. I think the view that information has a currency value, the information itself is what drives the need and the desire for privacy right now. So you can take social media. Facebook's a classic example. I think you and I would agree, and most rational people would agree, that the reason Facebook is free is because your data is being resold. So it's the value is in you on the platform and the content you generate. Agreed. My point in terms of privacy as a currency or not as a currency and having value or not having value vis-a-vis information is that it's not the information itself that carries the price tag, right? It's the movement of the information. And so this goes back to that asymmetry where right now my information can be converted into some type of monetary currency value, okay? Because it's being moved from where it is to where it's not. And if you rebalance that and information is everywhere ubiquitously, then it won't have any movement, thus no value. See, and there's a subtle distinction there. Does that make sense?
Well, no, I absolutely does. So, where I was going to go in some of these things, as I was reading this portion of the book, what started to I started to think about was, one, information to me is a currency, and it's no different than the perceived value that we place on it, such as Bitcoin. It fluctuates constantly, and our own government system of money, which is just backed by the word of the government, which is what makes it valuable. But as information is moving, as it's in some ways, the way information is, in which I think, and how I started to think about it is, how is our information just not like the stock market? If it's not moving at all, no one's trading in it because it's not valuable because it's just not moving. No one's no one's purchasing a stock that doesn't have a volume of buys and sells. If it's all being bought, then of course the price goes up. If it's all being sold, price goes down. But if nothing happens, it's not valuable.
Right. See, and I think that's a good analogy. Well said. And I think one of the distinctions you can start to draw between a stock and, let's say, a datum as a manifestation of privacy or privacy applied to that piece of data is that, I don't know that I've ever seen a stock flatline unless it goes to zero. There's usually at least some volatility. And I think that speaks to it having a price tag on it, it actually having the value as an attribute. See, I don't think information contains a characteristic called value. I think we put value onto it through these other mechanisms like movement. But I don't think the information itself has value.
Oh, right. It's all what we perceive it to be, just like in a stock, of what it's, and actually we're betting on its future value in many ways, whether or not it be to go up or down. So, getting, slightly changing a little bit, you had posited that there were 4 flaws of privacy. Why don't you go ahead and share them with the audience so maybe it'll help them
Dude, I don't have the book in front of me. What are you talking about?
These are your flaws.
See, man, I write books and then I just move on. What were they, dude? Oh my god. Okay, yeah. Well, I think what you can talk about. I'll start with illusion, right? That one was hard to write because it's so easy to construe the other 3 as part of the illusion, and in some way they are. And so I started to think about illusion as apparent or a meta flaw, because I started to think about privacy as almost a psychological pathology. And so that got a little dangerous to write about. I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, right? To be fair, I'm not a philosopher either, even though I play one sometimes. But when you talk about a flaw in privacy vis-a-vis illusion, what I was talking about is that even for those times when we think we have privacy or that we're applying privacy to some piece of information, it's not really there. Like, privacy isn't a thing. And this is another thing that you can contrast against value. Like, value as a characteristic is something. Like, there's a material difference between my George Washington dollar bill and my 5 or my 10 or my 20 or my hundreds, right? I mean, there's actually a material difference between it, and it's non-illusionary. The difference between privacy, by its nature, is based on illusion. And so you can see this in the things that I think are private versus the things that you think are private. And you can see it. I think one of the, if there were one example I came up with in the book, I think my favorite one is the email. And so if I type up an email, let's say I put some deep personal secret in it that I've kept private my entire life, and I typo the email address and I hit send. And in that moment, when I realize that I've sent it to the wrong person, okay? And then in that same moment, somebody reading it, okay? And so like send receipts are on and receive read receipts are on and stuff like that. Start to think about, if privacy exists, when does it end in that scenario? Is it when I sent it, knowing that it went to the wrong person? Or is it when that person reads it? And then do they have to read the entire thing? And so to what degree is privacy eroded or evaporated? And in that moment, and thinking about that example, is when I started to realize that actually it's just, all of it's just an illusion. It actually isn't there. There really never is any privacy. It only exists within, as you said with stocks, my perception of the information. And that's it.
And the person who may have it in their possession, their perception of the value as well.
Right.
Because while you perceive it to be highly valuable, they may look at this and go, "This is what the hell is this stuff?" and just delete it.
Yeah, like shoe size. It's just a stupid example. Maybe I perceive myself to have small feet, and so I keep my shoe size private because I don't want people to think less of me for having small feet because of what that may connotate. You dig what I'm saying? And so let's say my shoe order is read by somebody. They don't care. They're just fulfilling my order. Like they work at Converse because they're filling my Chuck Taylor order, right? And so in that moment, you can see, in my view, especially with the other flaws stacked up, that it really is just illusion.
Sure.
And I think most importantly, because of that flaw, it engenders a pathology where, I mean, we've both met people that are pretty zealous about privacy to the degree that is the direct opposite of the people that are super zealous about getting rid of it.
Yes, absolutely. So your 4 flaws of privacy are: one is a zero-sum heuristic.
Yes.
Privacy as an anthropomorphism.
Yes.
Privacy as declines, and privacy as perception.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to go through each one of them? I don't know that you want to.
No, those are just the 4,
Yeah. Well, to tie into the illusion too, and I think of those, what gave me the idea about illusion is that how we anthropomorphize information and thus privacy, like it's a living thing. It's intangible and inanimate, and it's a critical fallacy in a true philosophical sense to give it some type of, well, human characteristic. The fact that we think it can be moved is interesting. The whole this actually, outside of the argument about privacy, also ties into the whole argument about piracy. Funny enough, right? Like, how am I really pirating a digital object? Like, it's just a copy. I didn't take the original thing. Like, everybody else can still have theirs too. So is it really stealing? I don't know where I land on that side of the debate, but
yeah, I don't know where I would necessarily land either. But I
don't think the answer is self-obvious. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I would definitely have to think about in more length. I mean, I've as I've gone through your book, and I plan, I need to read it again because it just, comes up with other ideas. And besides, I want to publish something the exact opposite. No.
Do it, man. We can have a little battle.
Well, that's what we do every week anyway. But
Yeah.
it's, we're not, in many ways, as you already know, we're not, so far apart on a lot of these things. Where I started thinking about some of it in the next part where you refer to like GPS tracking.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And as each one little individual point along your route to or from work may not matter. But then I started thinking about what's going on in Baltimore City and how the government is using a drone to just track people and record everything. That while your normal GPS route may not matter, but what happens if the drone is just constantly following you, waiting for you to go 67 miles an hour on that 55, so you automatically get a ticket? I mean, that's still data. Does privacy, to me, at least in the way if amongst citizens, is one construct, but when we take a government and add their overlay to it, I think that changes the paradigm about privacy again, because they're just recording things for, which I feel is a huge abuse of power, because they have unlimited funds and can do anything with it. And I start to go, citizen to citizen, I could see, all right, if we, if everything was kind of out there, which is why I also think in some ways social media is good for those people that were kind of in the dating scene. If, you are in a relationship and you're out on some dating site, people can easily find out, like, wait a minute, you're cheating on your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever your significant other is. I think those things are that takes, you have to be an honest broker. But when you add the government layer on top of it, that's where I start to get uneasy.
Yeah, and that's certainly a huge breakdown in the application of my idea to the current day, because that's a huge asymmetry. Here's what I would suggest, because at some point, let's assume in the future this idea of ending privacy to free us becomes real in some way. How do you start getting there? Because at some point you have to start, right? This is a perfect example for me. It is the problem with all systems like that. Like, I mean, we've experienced through the Patriot Act after 9/11, and it's a rampant abuse. Part of what started this idea in the first place was when we were working at a privacy company, essentially. I started to think about what privacy meant and why we even were pushing it, like as a product, okay? And so when you think about this drone following people around, capturing who knows what, full audio and video, and sending it where to be consumed by who, when, you have no idea. You've lost complete control over it. And I think understandably that freaks people out, and it should, right? I think what people think the natural answer is to somehow shield themselves from the drone as a technology that is this instrument of privacy invasion, right? I think that's the wrong answer. I think the wrong answer is to find a way to render either the technology or, more importantly, the human system behind it that's consuming it worthless. And that's by freeing up the information. Rather than hiding it, finding a way to safely putting it all out there. Well, it's like that great scene in 8 Mile at the end when Eminem makes fun of himself in the rap. Well, he just shuts the other guy down, right? Because the other guy now has nothing to use against him. That asymmetry's been removed. And there's parity, which is a big part of my idea of how you get to the end of privacy is through parity. And so parity is that balance that removes the asymmetry. And now, technically, how do you do that? I don't know, because, this is the thing, like with cameras or GPS, they have a lot of benefit. The problem isn't the technology itself. The problem are the systems that consume the information from that technology. That has to be fixed. And I think, at least in a huge part, it has to start with our own intellectual approach to information and the social contract we all buy into in our society.
Yeah, it's, I continue going back and forth because having had my data compromised because the government failed to protect it, certainly makes me even more concerned over the amounts of data that they continue to just collect and store for some type of future use. And I started thinking, what was I can never remember the name. It was Judge Dredd. The original Judge Dredd was Sylvester Stallone. And if our data was like every time he had to use his sidearm, it automatically put an imprint on it. Think like blockchain. Everything that we do, it's got that, and we know where all of our data is at any given time, and can just remove access at any given time. So essentially rendering its flow, then it no longer has a value either. But that's a protection aspect, which still kind of goes against what you've been saying in the book, and a lot of your philosophies, because even though I've removed it, I'm using something, my own energy, to make it no longer valuable, rather than everything just being open and everyone having the same access. So, maybe no, or at least that's what I kind of took from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the way the book is written that's contrary to it. I would concede that point, though, insofar as, like, here's something we've lived with, because I really do believe we're in this intermediary state between where you and I grew up without any of this and where we're at now, which is, a hyper user content driven environment. I mean, Web 2.0 exists to such a degree that I don't think I remember Web 0.0. It being one of the creators of what was a Web 1.0 e-commerce platform in the first startup I worked at. Dude, I don't remember what it was like. You know what I mean? Part of the problem is in a small group, there's a social dynamic whereby it's expected that you change over time, right? And you have this, like, take the element of forgiveness. That's why forgiveness exists as a human construct, because I have to have the ability to recognize that you're not the same Dan that I met 10 years ago. You're
Let's just be clear, though. Let's just be clear. God forgives, I don't.
Hey, man. Please. Right? You know what I mean? And so you and I can negotiate that space because it's wired into us. The way the internet exists right now, because it's user content driven, doesn't exist that way. And it's really fucked up, because I can say something like that, and 5 years from now, somebody can come back and look at it, and somehow, because of the way the technology is, it gives us the idea that you're never different. You're that person still. And you see this all the time with Twitter and people getting canceled because it's something they said 10 years ago. Well, first of all, it's out of context. Second of all, it's 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I do, like, in the very beginning of when COVID-19 came out, I was like, I'm not worried, not concerned. But then I get more information and I start to change my thought, because I now have access to more data. And it changed. And then, here we are now. I'm now thinking about, like, this is going to happen again. And if our government response is the exact same, I'm going to be extremely angry, because I'm willing to accept a small amount for a short period of time of my rights to be infringed upon, in order for us to learn how things are going to transpire. But the government, having much more access to data and information, not just in this country, everywhere, they should be able to respond better next time. And that also started getting me thinking back to my days when I did need to have more privacy and some energy that will need to be expended upon that. And I don't know if we've ever talked about the works and research by J.J. Luna.
We haven't talked about it, no.
Yeah, so J.J., he's written many books. He's done a lot of things on, like, his last one, at least the last one I read, was How to Be Invisible. And it gets into the use of starting anonymous LLCs. And you would take, people may go, oh, there's no such thing. Well, that's not true, because in New Mexico, Nevada, even California, you can have an anonymous LLC where, as long as it's only one owner on it, and that as such, the way the tax laws used to be. If it's just one owner in LLC, I can just take the revenue from that and put it on my regular tax forms and pay taxes on it. But in California, it's actually quite expensive. In LLC, it's something like, I don't know, $600 a year. In New Mexico, it's 25. Nevada has it. Alaska has it. Wyoming has it. Wyoming's laws might be the best, at least from what JJ had wrote. And then the idea is you put people on a wild goose chase. And you have to look at your, who you're trying to defend against. And this is where I get back into the government piece, right? If I'm just trying to protect my data and myself from, a level 1 attacker, or in this case, adversary, then I don't have to do a lot. I mean, you think about it as like, hey, that's just regular Joe citizen learning how to use Google. I'm just trying to protect that. That's pretty easy to defend against. A run-of-the-mill local PI, well, they've got some skills. So it means I got to step up my game. That means I can no longer have mail delivered to my house. I no longer have Amazon packages delivered to my house. I have my utilities in some cases that are in an anonymous LLC. That's in the name of it. So people, and I have different ones for everything. Your next one is your next level of private investigator that it's willing to break the law. Well, now I got to go even further. And then you've got your next step, which is organized crime, basically governments, or I would consider organized crime in a way a government. It's those people and individuals that have unlimited resources, which is your level 4, which means the only way you can get around that is by also having level 4 privacy, which is a private citizen you cannot do, which is to reconstruct being in witness protection program. Right. And we can't, as a private citizen, do that. We're not able to go and just change our identity with new social security numbers and new everything. We can't do that. So you have to look at what you're trying to protect your information from. And if it's the government, good luck, because they have unlimited resources.
Right. Well, and so two things. One, going back to the point we were just talking about, I would totally support, and I think it's a big problem that we don't have the ability to dynamically filter and edit our information. That's part of my co-op idea. Like, not only should I be able to profit from it too, and then I don't have as much of a problem with it being moved around, but I should be able to edit it as I see fit. The details of that, I don't know how to deal with necessarily, but yeah. Now, with like these levels and the idea of privacy, don't you think that when people think about their need for privacy, they're in most cases, for some reason, thinking about level 4? Like, I think most people think about privacy versus the government. And because I don't think they view Facebook differently than the federal government. I mean, to them, it's the same threat to the privacy.
Yeah, I would actually take I will say, somewhat opposite view, because most people, when you talk to them about the need for privacy, they go, well, I don't have anything to hide. Who would want any of my stuff? It tends to be with a lot of response that I get from the average person. And then I have to start getting them to think, but it's not just your data today. And you got to look about who may be trying to access your data. I take them back to, hey, that person in Ukraine that only needs $200 a month to live a decent life. Do you have $200 in your bank account? Well, yeah. That's 1 month that person will be able to live off of. So they look at it in a context of, at least most of them seem to be like, well, but who would want my stuff?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
You don't know, because they don't know the value of their things. And that's why their perception of their own value to that of someone else is very low. So
see, it's interesting, because that's almost part of the way forward too, is to get people to realize that not that information has value necessarily, but that they ought to value themselves more than they do, right? It's not that you have nothing to hide or you should have something to hide. It's about you implicitly generate information. And so do you want control over that, or do you want somebody else to have control over it? And that's part of what I talk about in the book too, is this idea of control, and how that works and what that means.
Absolutely. So, Jason, Dr. Jason Pittman, the ninja, what's next for you?
Oh man. Okay, check this out. You ready?
Yeah.
I got a few things to finish up because classes ended. My finals ended last week. And so I've started putting together what I'm working on for the summer. And my next book that I have a follow-up to the privacy book that explores more of the mentality of we need privacy, we don't need privacy, and what that actually means more technically. I might work on that this summer. I think maybe more likely what I work on is in classical education, in a liberal arts school, there's 7 liberal arts, and this is defined in the classic medieval system. Okay. And it's a way to become a free man, all the way back to the Greeks. Okay. And so it's like logic, rhetoric, and grammar. That's the trivium. And then you add on the quadrivium, which is numbers, and then numbers in time, space, and so forth and so on. You get these 7 constructs. Okay. Foundation of every liberal arts university. And so High Point University is a Methodist liberal arts university, and the liberal arts is our big deal. And it's over time, it started to occur to me that the trivium, logic, rhetoric, and grammar, when they're put into the correct order, actually are a universal computation. So it's input to a processor with output. And so when you start to conceive of it that way, then you take the numbers in from the quadrivium, it starts to mean something. And so I'm actually working on an idea that computation is the 8th liberal art.
And all right. And when should we expect this book to be released?
Oh man, you put me on the spot.
Well, yeah, it's time to pay Dr. Ford. And there's the money question.
I've written the title. No, if I'm going to do one of those 2 books, I like writing a book over the summer because it's fun to get up and write 1,000 words a day. You know what I mean? It takes me back to how we did our dissertations, and I like that. I like that style of work. Just regardless of what book I do, it'll be done by fall. So I would say probably September, October. Once I'm done editing it, it'll be up on Amazon. And for anybody that's thinking about it, man, self-publishing through Amazon is easy, dude. Easy. I had long debates with a friend who has some of like the top textbooks on Amazon through traditional publishers. And could you imagine, this dude has like his book is in the top 3 of the philosophy of ethics textbooks on Amazon. And that dude's royalties were like $10 one year.
So, my theory on, my feelings on ethics.
Yeah, but how do you feel about only getting $10 of royalties for a top-selling textbook? I don't like that.
Well,
I'm not a big fan of that.
And this is the funny thing is you should be telling your friend in this case, in that that's completely ethical for the corporation that's doing it, because one of the biggest things that I learned in my MBA, which is only really 2 things, I could sum it up to. One, no matter what question you're pondering about when it comes to business in some way, shape, or form, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, how does this promote shareholder value?
Yeah.
That's it, right? So that ethical aspect for that, your friend, is that corporation is making a lot more money off that book, and that's why he only gets $10, because it's for the corporation's shareholder value, not his shareholder. And if people aren't looking out for shareholder number 1,
there you go. See, and so I'm not a filthy leftist. I don't have a problem with the corporation making money. I don't have a problem creating a corporation for myself either.
Right.
And so, I just set out, I wrote the book because I wanted to, and I wanted to put it out there. It's kind of like my manifesto in some way about privacy. And I really don't care how much money I make. I don't really look at it. I think I've made maybe $70, but that's my $70. I didn't split it with anybody.
Right. Well, and that's a big reason why we started This Life in Tech,
Mm-hmm.
why I'm doing, my show here at Inside My Brain, the Lair. I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing this because I want to talk to interesting people. I want to hopefully provide people in that they could come into contact with that just think differently. And maybe we can even explain some concepts that they may have been thinking about. Like when I had Catherine on, and I've got some of my MBA cohort mates, they're like, oh, I don't agree about this with China. Well, come on, let's talk about
Perfect.
it, right? Because, the thing is, even when we get back into that Chinese manufacturing, it's a lot more than just the money. Like, money's just one piece to the whole equation of why manufacturing can't come back here. But anyway, Dr. Pittman, I appreciate you coming on. I hope people will decide to read your book. It was entertaining, to say the least. I think that you should have probably put Marcia and I like right side by side, so we're both, remembered the most in the book, not
Hey, man.
not me. Because the way I took it is, oh wow, this was really nice that Jason put me in first, and then I read that last thing, and I'm going, maybe he wants me to be remembered the least.
I could make some comments about living arrangements that would put you first, but.
All right, my friend, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. Good luck to you. I hope you have a great summer, and I guess I'll talk to you on Sunday on This Life in Tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers, everybody.